All right, we should be live on YouTube. Welcome everyone to Core Dev Meetings. This time we selected agenda based on sort of voting with the voting app, just in order to sort of get 3 to 5 topics that we can talk about more in depth, as opposed to having 10 things that we talk about. So with that said, I guess we can get started with the first topic, which is rethinking mail server version 2. Adam, do you want to take away?
Yeah, sure. Just to bring back what we were talking on the last call, there was discussion about log-based communication and moving offline messaging to IPFS or Swarm in order to decentralize the storage and in order to get rid of mail servers as they are now. And yeah, so the other version of that I've been thinking of is to kind of reward what we're describing here. So instead of mail servers, the idea is to build something which we could call Whisper Global Archives or something like that. So we would pretty much create a set of tools so that you are able to save the Whisper history permanently on IPFS or Swarm or whatever. And we would not call it like a mail server, which is kind of misleading for many people, and they are not really understand what it means, to kind of a version where it would be like Whisper archives, and it would allow people to get to access historic messages, but not necessarily, it would not necessarily be connected to the communication of any sort. And the idea here is like the rough idea that I got in my mind is that we would build a set of tools, and using these tools, anyone could run this history. So of course, our need would be to have like a single history of all Whisper messages because we want to deliver offline experience. So we would run these services that would do that, and we would have like a single history in IPFS or Swarm.
There were 3.
But yeah, the main difference would be that this whole history would be stored on like decentralized way, and not like now that each mail server node needs to store all Whisper history to be used for. Later, when all this history is stored on decentralized storage, we would need to, like, there would be a way somehow, that's not clear yet, to traverse this history and get to blobs of data that you are particularly interested in because you want to get some messages while the application on the status app was offline. So that's the rough idea. Just wanted to share this vision. Maybe it's not necessarily any concrete example or like super specific, like any specific like specification that describes this in details, but just like a vision. So the other important thing here is that this history, even if we would create this Whisper history, that would be like forkable. So for example, if from one point of time someone would like to be independent from us while we would run the servers, and someone would like to also like fork it pretty much, so run their offline history and use their services to access this somehow because any reason, they could do it, and they could point to our Whisper history. So they would not start from scratch. They would still be able to access the history before they run service. So that's also the important part of this idea. So yeah, that's pretty much the description of that. As I said, hopefully this week I can start, and maybe someone else would like to help me to write a bit more details about it and get into details of IPFS and Swarm, of the features that they have that could help with that, with this solution. Yeah, that's pretty much. If you have any questions, let me know. But yeah, I'll gonna try to be more specific this week.
How do you see this fitting into the Q3 OKRs?
I think that this is really connected with our cluster. So decentralizing our cluster and removing our cluster as being like a single point of failure, because right now Maze server is pretty much even worse than Whisper nodes, because Whisper nodes, it's very easy right now to run them. Even when we had a call on Friday with guys from dApp node and they showed us how this solution works. You know, if the node does not need to have any disk space and any stuff like that, and Whisper nodes can also use this discovery, peer discovery protocol easily. That's fairly easy to decentralize and actually get rid of Whisper nodes from our server. Even we could use Status Desktop for that. But with Maze server, it's much harder because you need to have these services, these nodes, like achieve pretty high uptime. So I believe that this is the solution for that. Just to sum up, like our cluster being single point of failure. That's the hugest thing to fix with this.
How so if I'm a user and I've been offline and I go online, where would I look for messages? Like would I directly go on IPFS, or would I go to a mail server and they would look on IPFS?
So that's something that I'm not really clear yet, because it depends on the features that IPFS or Swarm can provide. So whether it's possible to easily navigate through the content on IPFS or Swarm and figure out parts of the content that you need for the history. If that's not possible and you need to have some additional index built in, I think that still would be possible, but you just need to make a little more requests. So it wouldn't be enough to just make a single request for IPFS or Swarm and say, like, get me messages from the last day. You would need to get like kind of an index tree, figure out which chunks you need to load, and then make a couple of requests to get the chunks that you need to get offline messages for the chat, public chats, and private chats that you are part of. But as I said, I haven't really looked into all features of IPFS or Swarm, so I'm not sure what capabilities they offer in terms of traversing the content that is stored there.
I've got a question, Adam.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm interested, and perhaps this is slightly off topic, let me know if it is, but will this type of architecture facilitate a UX where, I mean, essentially someone could log into a different client, but a client that works on top of the Status network, and log in with their contact code, or I guess it would be the key, and be able to retrieve all their contacts and chats, but on a completely different client?
I mean, the IPFS or Swarm can definitely be used for that. I guess we already, there was already such an idea where we were talking about storing the contacts and other things on IPFS or Swarm, and so that you could easily retrieve it on the new device. Yeah, I mean, definitely, I think that Whisper, I think that Swarm or IPFS are technologies that can be used for that, and I don't see any other alternatives right now. But yeah, some decentralized storage can definitely be an answer here. It's just gonna be independent solution. It just they could use the same technology like Whisper, like IPFS or Swarm, but you know, these things are not gonna be connected at all.
Sure. Thanks.
Sure.
So I believe right now we don't have Swarm or IPFS support. So would it be via Gateway, or would that be part of the solution as well? Because it seems like a big blocker in terms of.
We have Swarm Gateway, actually.
I know Gateway, but not I mean, natively.
Yes.
I guess, I mean, how do you see the solution in terms of, like, is it okay if we rely on a gateway? Is that like improving decentralization, or is it that's sort of a prerequisite before we can actually rely on Swarm or IPFS?
I think that even if we would need to rely on a gateway, that's still better than what we have now. Because right now you need to also connect to a mail server. So you also need to trust mail server and you leak some metadata. Now, if you need to connect to gateway, you're pretty much going to leak the same metadata. And you can decide on which gateway you would like to connect to. So I don't see any big difference here in terms of like privacy and metadata. It seems like the same. Yeah, it's just different way of doing that. We're using IPFS or Swarm, even if the gateway right now can enable us in the future when the light Swarm clients or some, I don't know, for example, if there's IPFS light Swarm light version, maybe there is. I haven't heard about it, but maybe it's possible. So I think that moving towards IPFS or Swarm is still going to enable us to provide a better solution in the future when the light clients for those platforms are available, even if they are not available now.
So yeah, looking at it as an iteration, I think is cool. I mean, we should try and do what it is that we can do at the state that we're at the moment.
How do you guys think it displays into, I guess maybe Pedro, your point of view in terms of the push notification work and sort of having that as a relay, where the one idea was that it should be the same sort of node as mail servers, but if we remove this special node, yeah, I guess how do people look at that? I'm curious to see Pedro's point of view.
Honestly, it's been a while since I've had this whole architecture in my mind with the push notifications v2. So when you say,
so I can say, I guess I mean from the white paper, there's like a specific use case that sort of is the way we implement the mail server is that it's for offline inboxing and for push notifications. But right now, the way push notifications work is it's tightly coupled to a specific provider and one-to-one person. So person A has direct address to send a trigger push notification at person B, but that means that there's no sort of spam protection and you have the other person's address and you can't change push notification provider and it doesn't support sort of public chat notification and so on. And one way of solving that and also creating some kind of economics around it, as described in the white paper, is to have a level of indirection where the level of indirection is to delegate to a specific trusted node, which would be the same as the mail server node. And then you have some registration logic. So you register that you want to receive push notifications through these means, and that's kind of abstracted away and so on.
Yeah. The way that where the work was left with push notifications v2, there was still the need to communicate, which mail server. So when you started a one-to-one communication with someone, you would inform him which mail server you were using, so that that person could send you messages and ask for a push notification to be sent to you. That's not ideal, it works, but ideally you would be free to change mail servers and not have communication breakdown in terms of push notifications with other, other contacts from you. So yeah, it's not a finished problem yet. It still has issues that need to be addressed.
Yeah, from my perspective, even if we would wanted to couple my servers and push notifications, it would be better, I guess, to figure out something that it's more like a protocol, how this communication can be established and making it independent from my servers. That would be ideal. I'm not sure. Yeah, I also haven't really been involved into designing push notification v2, so I don't really know the details. But it looks like at least from the from my perspective, that it would be much better to make these things independent, because if we just couple them, there's any decision regarding one or another is gonna change the way the other thing works. So just like from like kind of engineering perspective, do we better to make those things independent, and kind of even if we need some communication, then we'd better to just do this on a protocol level rather than kind of coupling it together.
Right, cool. Does anyone else have any thoughts on this? Concerns or thoughts on the general direction or anything?
Yeah, I actually have a thought that's the perfect push notifications for like decentralized infrastructure would be that the client itself decides if it shows notifications or not. So it's essentially like scraping the Firebase and everything and just using local notifications, and the client is responsible to receiving a Whisper message somehow in the background. And then if it's like, if it needs to, then just show a local notification. And this will also solve the problem that our notification is there, but not the Whisper message. But that will require some rework on how we receive messages in the background and Whisper messages. And then you don't need any trusted nodes, and you don't need Firebase keys, and you don't need any kind of tokens. And you just receive a package, and then if client decided that, okay, from this, in this like one-to-one chat, I want to receive notifications, then it just shows.
Yeah, the only question with that is the latency. You know, you have a trade-off between latency and power consumption and bandwidth consumption.
Yeah, but I mean, it's still like if you use Firebase, for instance, and you don't really send all the payload in the push notification, then okay, you receive the notification and you click on it, and you still need to somehow receive the Whisper envelope. Yeah.
I think there is a GitHub issue from Eric that details how this should work, which is basically just get a Firebase notification to trigger the logic to fetch messages, and then it can populate the push notification with further detail once it got the messages from Whisper. So initially, it just says you receive the message, then the app starts in the background and populates the actual push notification and shows it.
Yeah. I mean, it's similar. I mean, there are tricks to do this on Android. It's not a problem, like even without that, because you can just poll servers at a certain interval. Might be fine. It won't be super quick.
But I agree. It would be the ideal solution is to not have to rely on it. Yeah, sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Just in instance of the same topic, is there something around the mail server and the proposal Adam started with that people want to have thoughts on? All right. I guess we can move on to Folk. I think that's also Adam.
Sorry,
go ahead, Ivan.
Yeah, can you hear me? So I just wanted to raise the brief discussion about, do we need at this point push notification at all? If we target Android platform as our primary platform for mobile, and we have status desktop, we don't have the problem that push notifications solve, right? We mainly need it for iOS users who can't do any background things. So we rely on the Apple or some other external mechanism to deliver messages. And if we can solve it, maybe not efficiently, but we can solve it for Android for now without, building the whole new stack and complexity into the app, wouldn't be it a better approach for now? What do you think?
I mean, first of all, you can do background on iOS. So it's a little bit more strict than on Android, and Android is getting more strict than it used to be. So it's kind of more or less the same right now on both platforms. Like essentially on iOS, you have around 30-ish seconds, sometimes 15, sometimes 30, depends on the device, to make a background request, receive data, and do whatever you want with them. Android is a little bit better right now, but they're getting more and more strict about that. So it's...
Yeah, sorry, guys. Just so we stay on topic, the only reason for bringing up the push notification was just in terms of how it impacts the mail server design. if we want to talk more about push notifications, then maybe we can bring it up at a different meeting with more specific sort of questions on. What do people think?
Yeah, but I mean, it's just
Okay.
more. What's the response about that we might not need to think about how to feed push notifications in this new design, because there are different
that's a
ways
good
of
point.
doing that.
Yeah.
Okay, makes sense. Thanks.
All right, cool. Adam, folk, or Dimitri maybe, I'm not sure.
Yeah, so there are two things here, just something to more like informative thing to do. So basically what we did recently was that we moved our patches from status Go to our fork Go Ethereum. And yeah, just right now Go Ethereum is used with deb, just like regular dependency, and you don't need to patch the vendor directory in status Go repository. So anyone who has been working on that and remember this, it's gone. It's simplified. It just you download, you update dependencies just like you would use deb without any additional patches, anything like that. And yeah, the one more thing is that the pull request is pending, but Dimitri worked on moving Whisper from Go Ethereum to status Go repository. So it's gonna be synced with the upstream, but pretty much the reason was that we just were growing with patches for Whisper like significantly, and also Dimitri recently has been working on a rate limiting thing in Whisper, and that's a little bit more code than we used to do with patches, and it was just too much patches to maintain. So the decision was that. The decision was to just move Whisper to a separate package in status Go, and that's it. So just an informative thing for everyone who's been working on status Go, and yeah, that's it.
Yeah, and I think that for Whisper it makes sense because we also want to do this Whisper gateway thing, which will also require some like refactorings of what Whisper does, and later we can of course upstream it. And I think that the idea is that since there are external companies that are interested in that, so we want to upstream that. But for now, it probably would be much easier to just implement it in status Go and then just submit a patch to Whisper instead of making a patch initially.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that was pretty much the goal.
Do we think about any way to ensure that we still going to contribute back to the upstream? Because I think we're risking to create our own fork.
Yeah, but also the problem was with contributing to upstream that a lot of pull requests just stay there forever. So
yeah, I think many of our changes could be definitely upstreamed, and we can just make a pull request and wait for the Go Ethereum to merge them and provide feedback first and merge them later. But some of the things that we want to experiment with, or just see if that makes sense, that requires a lot of patches. And before we want to upstream, we would like to test it, and it's just much easier right now when we have the package Whisper package in the repository instead of going through the whole patching phase. And if you decide to remove it and you submit other patches on top of that, then it's a problem, and so on and so forth. So generally, it's to simplify the whole process of experimenting. But yeah, it's in terms of submitting submitting changes to the upstream, it's just gonna be the same. We didn't have any special way of doing that before, and right now it's just gonna be very similar. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm more concerned.
Makes perfect sense.
I'm more concerned with different directions. So how do we? Who will be responsible for keeping our fork up to date and like rebasing all the patches and things like that? Because before it was more obvious because you just update. The upgrade process was more obvious and streamlined, and it was obvious which patches are applied, which are not applied, and things like that. Now it's of course it's faster to develop new features, and that's what we want, but it will be a bit more cumbersome process of upgrading. So what's the plan for that?
Yeah, that's a good point. There is no any specifics about it. We can definitely, I just put a note and work around it. But yeah, I mean, definitely it just needs we need to figure out something, some way to do that. We do not have any process, like official one, to upgrade Get. We just look at the newest version, and if it appears there, we just upgrade it. Now I think it might be very similar. Just the small problem is that I mean, we can like make it another point when you upgrade Get, you just need to look at the pull requests that were merged in the Whisper package maybe, and just move them to our package if it makes sense. That could be the way to do it. But yeah, definitely we need to kind of document that so it's clear how it happens. But yeah, that's true that there's no official any documentation or any plan that is like, officially proposed yet.
One more thing related to that is that is it possible, or do you think it's a good idea to create a set of like unit tests that prove that all our patches are like applied to the new fork? So for instance, when you upgrade, you have some kind of status patches tests, things like that test the specific behavior that we alter in Get or Whisper, and then when you upgrade, you kind of to the like vanilla Get, this all tests fail, and then you need to restore them because you need this behavior. What I'm afraid of that we just will lose some patches or things like that along the way. That's my biggest concern probably about it.
Maybe we could work on that. So, but generally, we should even if our Whisper version is gonna have a little more features, it still should be compatible, like backward compatible with the Whisper protocol, right? So some guarantee, like some assurance that it's still a case. That might be pretty good idea, and we should definitely do this. That's a good point. Yep, I'll just put a note for that.
Yeah, I just was not. I'm pretty sure that we won't forget features, but I'm more think okay, we had some race condition that we fixed locally, and we waiting for it to be merged to upstream, but it's still locally, and then we upgrade to the new Get, and we want it would be cool to make sure that this patch is still there, and we don't have this race condition and things like that.
Yep.
Okay, cool. Does someone else have any thoughts on this general topic? I guess this is more of like an FYI and brief conversation. I guess Adam, just briefly, just for the agenda and so on, what specific actions do we have for the mail server version 2 in your view?
Sorry. What specific?
What sort of the specific next steps for the mail server version 2?
I think that like some more formal description of the solution would be the first step, because what I just described today, what was like a kind of a vision rather than a specific plan. So I imagine that doing it this way is gonna work, but yeah, definitely something more concrete. Some documentation, specification, how this whole thing could work is the next step.
Okay. Cool. All right. So next topic, chat message bridge. I guess Julian or Andre maybe.
Yeah, I will discuss it a bit. So, well, I guess we already touched a little bit on the subject with the previous discussion around like mail servers and push notification. But essentially, the high-level use case we have, and it's a use case we have been discussing with a lot of different developers, so it's pretty important and interesting. So the use case is to have some way to asynchronously notify someone using status that some action has to be performed. the simplest way we could figure this out is to just have a push notification being received by status users. And so the simple way to do that is just to send a message that will trigger a push notification. And then that's where it gets a little bit more complex, because, well, those two things are actually separate, even if from the user perspective, I would say that they probably are related always, or they should conceptually. So the idea is to have some way for any external process to send a message with a push notification. So that's based on some discussion between Igor and Andre that they had during the hackathon at S Berlin. And the current option we are considering is to create a centralized gateway to achieve that. So a little bit similar to what you can do with Infura. So it's probably not the best solution that we will consider in the future, but at least at short term, it seems like it could be sufficient for us. And so what I'd like to discuss and eventually have opinion about is how we can make this API like the simplest thing possible, but then at the same time, we still want to keep security, of course, and privacy. So the main issue we have is that so far push notification rely on Firebase. And if you want to have some external process triggering a push notification, then you need to share some Firebase token. So some private token, which is specific to each users. And well, I'm not sure if there is a better solution short term, or if eventually push notification, like the new version of push notification we are working on could address that. But yeah, that's kind of the current state of the ID that we have. So I think I already shared there is a discuss page around that, and some people already discussed and shared their opinion about it. But maybe just for the sake of sharing with all the developers, if either Igor or Pedro could comment on that, I would be interested in hearing what they think about it.
Yeah, since I was planning to start implementing it like this week, so I have something to say. First of all, there are two things, right? One thing is push notifications problem, which for me is a separate thing, and another one is how can a DApp send a whisper message or something like this in a simple way, and when we are not around, right? So because imagine that, because the use case is like you open the application, you sign up for, I don't know, some notification of some event, and then you close the application, and then you want to receive a push notification from some DApp about that, oh, event has happened. I don't know, you traded something, or new kitty was, I don't know, born or something like that. So for that, for the push notifications, I think we don't need to share. I mean, I'm opposed sharing any kind of tokens with any DApps. And I think if we have, for this phase, if we're talking about any kind of centralized HTTP like service that will send whisper messages, then like problem solved, because this service can be kind of trusted if it run by us. We can share the tokens with it.
I'm sorry, but I would just cut off. I think I don't think it's a good idea to go with something centralized and say that's okay. Like, we should come up with a design that's decentralized from the ground up. Like, it doesn't make sense that we are introducing more centralization.
But
to me,
then,
especially when we have a specific case in the white paper for doing this. Like, why? I feel like that's the wrong starting point.
Yeah, but someone needs to. I mean, push notifications mechanism is centralized. Period. Right? It's something centralized, and it's either Apple or Google or whatever Firebase is running on. It's a central point right now. It doesn't.
I mean, that's just part of it. That's part of the end journey, and that's by necessity. That doesn't mean that our services in terms of triggering it and the logic around it has to be centralized, because you can still have, that's Firebase is just one example, right? And you can have F-Droid, and there's all kinds of mechanisms that you can use. It's just the case that right now we only have Firebase, right? But it's the same. You have multiple clients. So you have iOS, you have Android, you have desktop. You might have different ones, and then you have different ways of delivering it, if it's Firebase or a Pigeon or whatever, right? But we should not sort of increase the centralization by having a single point of failure that we are hosting. That's just the wrong starting point completely to me.
Yeah, but then it means that we still need to somehow, like, because these tokens, they're not supposed to, probably we shouldn't share them with everyone, because I have serious concern about spam protection.
I agree. Yeah, that's the initial design with Pushnotification version 2 that was passed to focus on better, to deal with some of those issues.
Yeah, okay, but again, it's only one part of the thing. Push notifications themselves, it's one part of the thing, and the second is running like Whisper, like being able to send Whisper messages from somewhere, like using like Infura-like APIs, but for Whisper, which is not really, it doesn't work right now because Whisper is stateful, and you have to store your keys somewhere. And what our idea is essentially to split sending Whisper message into two parts. One is creating a Whisper message and signing it and encrypting on a client side, and then just have an API that's just push this message into Whisper network, like some RPC API.
Sorry, could you explain again what's the use cases for this bridge except of the push notifications?
I mean, sending any messages when you are not in the app to any chat. For instance, if somebody needs to send a message.
Somebody who, like, some concrete example. Can you think about any?
Like any DApp, I think
there's quite a few. Like, for instance, on one that I've been giving lately is on Block Party. If you attended an event and there is ETH to be distributed afterwards, maybe Block Party would want to notify you that you can collect that ETH now. Bounties Network might want to notify somebody that their bounty submission was accepted or not accepted for some reasons. CryptoKitties might want to say that your cat was successfully bred. That's the nature of like the notifications we're thinking about.
All right. So the sender should be who is the sender? Is it an app that's running on the mobile, or it's some server daemon, or
it's
what is
some
it?
server thing? I mean, if it was running, if it was JavaScript that was running in our DApp browser, wouldn't be much easier, right? Because then you just expose a necessary API and it works. But yeah, so
the whole idea is you want to have some external system that contacts you, even if status is not running, or even, well, for sure, even if no DApp is running. So another concrete use case is MakerDAO. So they have like very complex contracts to do whatever they are doing, and sometimes they have to inform users that users have to make like a specific action, but very quickly, unless they will lose money or that kind of things. So they specifically asked us to have that kind of API or way to trigger a push notification inside the status.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, like, this is pretty much exactly the first use case in the white paper. Why don't we want to implement it in a similar way as described there and have actual economics, and implementing it in a fairly decentralized fashion as opposed to just ignoring economics and hosting it like a standard SaaS 2.0 app? I don't understand why that's not the more priority.
Oh, so sorry, I'm a bit confused. So the suggestion was to host it somewhere and allow external resources to talk over the internet to some predefined URL, or what?
Yeah, initially it was just like, I don't know, what we did on a hackathon was just sending a Whisper message from an HTTP endpoint, and that was it, without storing your private key on this server. That's sort of what was done, right? Because right now Whisper architecture doesn't allow you to do that, so it doesn't have like send draw transaction, but for Whisper. And,
okay, but yeah. So do I understand correctly? It could be done now if anyone just start the status_d daemon locally and talk to it over, we have library like SDK, like status SDK or something, or over direct IPC, whatever, and just talk to this local instance of status_d, and it will achieve the same thing, no?
Yeah, if they are ready to, if they want to host it like this, yes. But the second part was also that we were contacted by Infura themselves, because probably they heard that, why Infura doesn't support Whisper, kind of question. So they are very interested in that because they want to host Whisper, and to host Whisper, they need to have it statelessly, to host it statelessly, because they don't want to store private keys of anyone. So it's not any different from the protocol. It's like talking to what Adam wrote. I have it here. Like Whisper is a protocol, right? But the implementation right now requires you to have a private key on the node that sends envelope. And so the idea, at least as I see it, was just, okay, just to remove this requirement, and that's it. And it won't be much different. And then it'll be the same envelopes, the same proof of work, the same whatever. It's just that it will have an additional API method that allows you to send a fully formed Whisper envelope through HTTP RPC, the same way as send draw transaction, like receives the signed transaction object and sends it into the network.
All right, so I get, okay, so what exactly then the proposal? To host it somewhere, or to provide a better API to talk to status_d, or both?
Well, for me, it was to change the Whisper API a little bit, and that's it. And then I didn't see the big picture.
This is harsh. This is harsh, like changing Whisper API to fulfill this.
Why? I mean, it's why is it harsh? Why? I mean, is Whisper API something sacred? And I won't change. I want to add one more method to it, or two more methods, to be clear.
Then question: what is Whisper API? Do you mean Web3 API?
Yeah, SSH Whisper API. Yeah. Well, what else could be the Whisper API?
Right.
I mean, yeah, the RPC API, like two more RPC methods to Whisper, and yeah.
But if we can if we can just ask users to host status_d somewhere, just launch, their own status_d and then connect to this status_d daemon over HTTP or whatever protocol, and problem solved. Why do we need to change API? I mean, Whisper API.
Well, I mean, you can of course ask it, but I mean, that's it's more convenient, of course, to have something like this API. Yeah, it's for convenience reason. But otherwise, why would we, I don't know, even have a status client at all? User can just run something on his own computer and send messages through RPC API and curl. It's perfectly fine. That's convenience, and some of these developers, they won't run it. And otherwise, they won't use it.
The reason that we run it on a client is because we have a wallet that's attached to it. Supposedly, I thought it's an integrated solution.
Yeah, but right now we're only talking about Whisper, right? So it's
Yeah, from my perspective, I would love to explore a bit more. Like, for example, let's say, let's take a block party as an example. Like, I don't know the process exactly, but as far as I remember, is that when you attended an event, blah blah blah, and the event is ended, now you want to inform everyone that that you can withdraw your funds, right? So the idea here is that this block party would not run any Ethereum node or Whisper node, and still they would like to inform other people about some event. That's what we want to do here, or
yeah, I mean, essentially, imagine you are hosting this on IPFS. Where would you run status D if you're hosting it on the app on IPFS?
Yep, it's if it's only hosted on IPFS, yeah, that's yeah, I am kind of locked off solution, right? I can use Infura, or I could use. I mean, if
status APIs if you are in the app, right?
Yeah. Yeah. If I'm in the app and using status and doing that using the status app on mobile, I imagine that there should be a way to somehow send a message through Whisper node running in status to people. So I would just reuse the Whisper node running on my device. When I run it in the browser, there's a problem because MetaMask, even if you can connect it to Infura, you won't be able to connect it to Whisper, right? That's the problem.
Yeah. Yes, and that's one of the things that, for instance, if we implement this RPC change and Infura like actually run this version, which they, as I understand, they want, then okay, it will work both in MetaMask and in status, and yeah, so and also it would be possible to, I don't know, send messages from MetaMask to status. That might be a good thing as well. But essentially, all the apps that already use Infura, it's like we are concerned, right, about decentralization and not using Infura and not using like our own cluster and things like that. But some of the apps, they are fine with just using Infura, or like MetaMask is fine with using Infura, and they will still continue using Infura, but they will also have the ability to send Whisper messages over it, which will hopefully increase the adoption of Whisper, which will hopefully increase the adoption of status. Or it might not happen, of course, but
yeah, at least like this use case, it seems fine. The problem is that you won't be able to receive responses, right? But I guess that's clear, right?
Yeah, but yeah, but that's a different again, and there is notification part, the second one.
Yeah, I think here it's important to see that the main use case is notification, and notification being sent outside of a dApp. So even, most of the time, status will not even be running. And that's the main important use case that we've been discussing so far. Because, yeah, you just want to receive notification and be informed of something anytime, without having to just make sure that then the right dApp is running, which kind of defeat the point of notifications.
So I would strongly recommend people read the white paper, and specifically the first use case, which is about essentially this class of problems. And unless there's a strong reason not to do that approach, I would suggest evaluating it, because it's actually decentralized, doesn't require sort of central solutions, and it has economics in it, which I haven't heard anything like that. I would just like reread it and think about it and how we can do it properly.
I strongly agree, and I would rather get rid of support for notification than moving from decentralized solution to centralized in some way. I mean, we're not building just yet another messenger, right? We're trying to make it decentralized thing, like a new thing. And if it means that we don't have push notification, that's fine.
Ricardo suggested I shared the screen, so let me just show very quickly. People don't know. So it's just the URL, right? And they have all these use cases, and it's the first one, decentralized push notification market, which is specifically about this general sort of problem of you have two stakeholders and then a third one who sort of acts as an intermediary, which is perfect for any kind of time delayed mechanism. And it's literally something where someone is providing value, a node is providing value to two other nodes, and that's sort of where the utility comes in. And it doesn't require any sort of central services or anything, and it actually has a specific S&D use case.
I mean, this
and
feels
this
like
is literally
a...
the push notification version 2.
So it feels like this would make OKR.
I don't understand what is the difficulty. What's making difficult to implement this?
Well, currently we are relying on Firebase to send asynchronous push notifications. So we have to get rid of this.
So excuse me for asking a really naive question, but does that mean that we don't currently have an implementation based on the white paper claim?
No, sir, it's very quiet. Your mic is very, very quiet.
So am I to understand properly that we don't have an implementation of what we put forth in the white paper?
Not yet.
Correct.
It's right now it's tightly coupled. So it's, if you have two people, A and B, then A is triggering a notification with B.
Yeah, and I think for like to have this stakeholder C, we probably need desktop or something like that, because it seems a bit tricky to have like to be a push notification provider on mobile.
So yes, it's probably not for mobile, but this ties into the push notification version 2 idea, and it also ties into the OKR around decentralization and having stacks running on multiple nodes, which is where it touches on what Adam was talking about, and also DApp node and so on, and desktop as well, absolutely.
So comparing how the system is right now, it's when you register yourself in status, you're going to receive push notifications from status server. This is something that the user agrees on because it's hard coded in the application. The difference in this push notification market would be that this agreement is not automatic. You don't have this automatic server that gives you push notifications. Instead, the system, you will need to find a node that you trust to give you that push notifications. Later on, we can develop something that minimize the trust needed between the user and this push notification node by using some fancy cryptography. But right now, we can just assume that the node will give the push notifications correct, and if it behaves bad, then it can the user can select another node.
100%, I agree. It's also worth noting that right now there's nothing specific about status sending it. It's via Firebase, but there's no status cluster server that's involved.
So how will the push notification provider receive like the payload?
Yeah, that will
be a Whisper application protocol message.
Mm-hmm.
So it happens. It doesn't touch the Whisper protocol. It's on our application protocol, which is agnostic for the transport. So the same logic would apply for PSS, for example.
Okay. Again, and then it means that we need some kind of simple gateway into Whisper from the app into Whisper, right? Because right now, otherwise it requires you to run a Whisper node locally. Like with current implementation, you have to run Whisper node locally no matter what.
for that, probably the app that wants a push notification system in the app needs to implement some script that would be run by these nodes and to query the network. And when some state change happened in the network, then it will create a message and send to a specific user. So of course, this script should be safe. The nodes cannot start reading from the user, from the node. It should only read from the blockchain and only answer to the node. So it's something like this.
Yeah, but I mean, there is no way right now to send the Whisper message without running a Whisper node locally. Or you giving your private keys to someone else, which you really don't want. There are two options right now in current Whisper implementation, and that's what is essentially what we want to fix. So you can sign a message locally and then push it somehow into Whisper network without having to have, like, if I'm a DApp owner and I don't want to run a server with a Whisper node, then I can use Infura or use whatever else to send it. That's why we wanted to tweak the Whisper protocol. Well, not protocol, Whisper API, SHH API right now. Or maybe there is the thing like that in PSS. I don't know. It needs to be investigated, I think.
So I am assuming that the nodes that we run the push notifications would be like status nodes that we develop that may run a lot of services that we need in status network. And
no, but I mean, the things like this. So imagine I am the DApp owner, right? I'm the owner of whatever horse racing DApp, and you bet with with this DApp you bet on some horses, right? And there is a horse race, and then I want to send you a push notification about the horse race is over, you won, for instance. And right now,
the design of your DApp is wrong because you cannot be the owner of the app. Of course, some people do it, but then you are actually wrong in this idea of we want to make centralized applications. These push notifications are for the centralized application. If you are the owner of the application, probably you can provide yourself. You can provide a node. Maybe we can give.
Okay, yeah, that's even better. Yeah, that's even better. It's a DApp that no one owns it, and who runs the node to send Whisper messages.
So who owns the user interface? Who owns the underlying mechanisms that is providing the user interface? For example, it's a JavaScript that is running locally in querying the blockchain. That's the DApp itself, and of course the smart contracts in the Ethereum. But for the push notification, probably it would be something like the user interface, but is like a backend interface that is used by these push notification services. That they will use something that the app developed, like for example, for the SEO search engine optimization, we have like that robots.txt and another thing configurations in the web server we can do. For a push notification, we also can have a specific file that is run by these status nodes. Of course, that they can. Maybe we can develop the syntax of it, or maybe we can use Lua or something else. Not sure what, but the idea is the file that the push notification server runs and can figure out. You can have multiple functions inside there, like for different types of notifications. It's something we need to figure out, something we need to imagine how to do it, because it doesn't exist right now. So, but it should be a file because there is no other way. It's basically the user chooses a push notification server to say, please run this file. When it outputs something, send the message for me. Something like this.
So it sounds to me like we need an API running on chain that any node can call in and run, basically something very, very agnostic.
You could imagine that you write it to contract somehow, and then the notification provider is polling it, and then you have some payment mechanism through that. Potentially, it could be a signed message.
Yeah, I have a question to Igor. So you're saying that you are playing an owner, but why do you play a one? Like, why you don't play a status developer? I completely agree with Ivan's arguments that you need to run status denote or get not to communicate using Whisper. The fact that someone provides Infura shouldn't influence our decision making. Why do you insist on it?
No, but I mean, it's just to like lower the threshold to adapt to Whisper adoption. Okay, yeah, we can just look up and think that, okay, you have to do X, you have to do Y, and of course all the developers will come and gladly run the services and set up monitoring for them and things like that. So,
but
and
it's also part of education, like.
Why? I mean, but I imagine I'm a separate business person that wants to create a service using like blockchain. And the more we want more business people and more businesses using blockchain, like in general for crypto, like for crypto adoption, we need like coffee shops, we need like betting sites, we need like grocery stores. We need them to adopt Ethereum or whatever crypto, right? And I'm talking like if we giving them more convenient way to build something without like some more technical mumbo jumbo, then well, it will more people will use it. I mean, I'm not talking like this about like status. Okay, we can just tell that yeah, you need to do X, you need to do Y. We'll give you guidelines and things like this. But then you limit the adoption with the less qualified people that's like build status, for instance.
But the primitives have to be decentralized, and of course people can build semi-centralized solutions on top of us. But we have to, the primitives we provide should be sort of proper and true to the Ethereum ecosystem. That doesn't mean that we don't allow other people to have semi-centralized things, but that has to be what we provide. Otherwise, we're not really an encapsulation of Ethereum.
Sorry, I don't think I understood.
I mean, so the primitives that we provide, status as whatever, so we are, the primitives have to be sort of decentralized and work without, if you turn on our cluster and so on, like we should still have the same uptime for communication and logic and all of that. It has to sort of be designed that way. And that doesn't mean people building on top of us in terms of solutions, convenience solutions, and so on. It doesn't mean that has to be 100% decentralized, as you say. And that's something we can encourage people. If there's like certain businesses that have certain needs, then maybe there are certain solutions that have to be made to interact with the legal system, whatever. But that's sort of separate, I think. That's on top of what we are building.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not talking that we need to we have to deploy and run the. So there are a few things. Okay, there is additional API to Whisper, right? And there is a deployment of our own cluster with this API that other dApps can use. And the second one, and as I understand, is we don't want to do that. We want to instead implement this white paper market of push notifications, right? But is there anyone who is against having 2 more API methods in Whisper that then can be used by Infura and the others? For those who can use Infura and stuff, so we won't deploy them. But like Infura takes our fork and deploy that, and so more people who use Infura anyway, they will use it for Whisper as well. But we don't host anything ourselves. Is that the right solution then? And we build because then Whisper is probably will be more adapted and things like this. But then we build the market of push notifications the right decentralized way. Or do we want to log into status something and just to log people into you have to install status D or whatever to be able to send messages to status? yeah.
That's a fair point. Maybe that's a reasonable comment. I don't know. I guess, I don't know.
Because I don't know who is like against what right now, because we are arguing about something and I don't think we actually having different of opinions. Like people who use Infura, they use Infura. I'm not talking that Status should only use Infura. What I'm talking to is to provide some additional APIs that we can also like whitelist in our Diab browser, these APIs. And also Infura can use them to deploy Whisper as a service thingy. And that's what I'm talking for. And I'm talking how this can like improve the adoption and things like that. But like deploying our own web service, yeah, that might not be a great idea. I agree.
Maybe we should park this discussion and continue it outside of the call as well, like in discussion and so on. Yeah. I think it's a good discussion, as Simon said, and maybe what do people think? Or do people want to keep talking about this right now?
Yeah, sure.
And I guess just worried about time. I don't have a lot. I'm not going to take a lot of time unless people have a lot of questions for the security audit stuff.
Of the notification, I think please invite me also to the another calls to implement this. We follow that.
Cool. I guess, is Pedro online or no?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Do you have any thoughts on?
There's a lot of stuff to take in right now, so I think it will be better to follow this up and discuss.
Cool.
Yeah, can we have like a very short round of like as again like super short. So what were you arguing against in this proposal? Those who like Eva, I want to really hear what Ivan says and what you Oscar think, and yeah, what specific points are you arguing against? Because yeah, it's kind of feedback.
Ivan, do you want to go first?
Sorry, I missed the question actually, Igor. Could you repeat that?
I mean, you started to arguing against something that's like in the whole idea. So which points are you most opposed to? Which points do you think are unacceptable for us in this idea? Like there is like this new 2 API methods, there is deploying our own cluster that exposes these API methods, and there is push notifications, like 3
deploying our nodes, our cluster, not the cluster servers, right, for that, and making our infrastructure relying on this. I'm not saying this is a bad solution, but it's against our, as Oscar said, our white paper and our general idea, and that's basically preventing us from developing other solution, which is more in line with our principles. That's it.
Oscar?
Yeah, what Ivan said, and then I also I would just pick to adding API calls. I am undecided. I'm not clear what the implications are. I guess my only general concern would be that we should be focused on sort of our core value propositions and sort of core business, and maybe invest our time more in that. But I don't know I don't know too much about specifically what the implications that would have in terms of compatibility and how much effort it would be and all these kinds of things. So maybe it's a reasonable trade-off, I don't know. But the main thing is around sort of hosting infrastructure ourselves, and given the problem that was stated in the beginning, that we are not sort of pursuing it, because to me it's a straight fit with the white paper. And it's a shame that we paused this work before the beta, because I think we could have been further along out. So I would really like us to revisit it and do it like it's written in the white paper, essentially, because I don't think we've learned anything new in the last year that would merit a different approach to this specific problem. in general. Yeah.
Yeah. So just to wrap it up, super last thing, that I'm not arguing for the deployment, and especially I'm not arguing for making status relying on anything like centralized. My idea was that we add these two methods and we expose them through our browser, like their browser. And then since Infura is interested in that, they will just take this method and deploy them. And we don't use that. They just take this from us, deploy it, and someone else will use them. But we won't. But for someone else, why is it good? For someone else, it might be some point of entry for simple point of entry for Whisper. But we still we as a status, we won't use this API in Infura, and and I'm working right now to bring LAS and ULC back so we can move from Infura at all. So it's that was my point initially. So I don't think we have any disagreement for that, or at least I don't see.
I think that
sounds good.
One problem with using Infura is that we are kind of limited by them. I can see that with your solution that we just open these two options. It's cool with that. I don't have any problem with this idea in specific. But in my vision, what will happen is that Infura will run like a status node and start serving like a very trustworthy status node in future. So we develop these mechanics that Infura and anyone can run, so we can kind of democratize this type of service. We may make anyone be able to, because we know that Infura is a single point of failure, and we don't want that. We don't have anything against people in Infura. We just don't want this point of failure. So we make this to everyone that can want to run it.
Yeah, but that would be we'll just make changes and they might take it, like anyone else can build status D with these changes and host their own nodes. It doesn't matter. It's just a simpler entry point into Whisper network, or like with an RPC.
I suggest there's more discussion that we park it.
Let's
cool.
Do something.
Yeah. Cool. And then we have ENS smart contract security audit, and maybe if we can get that done in a few minutes, and then we can just have a brief sort of 10 minutes for quick announcement, and also just briefly feedback on the format before we finish this call. Does that sound good to people?
Yep.
Smart
contract stuff. Quick update for anybody who doesn't know. We engaged Sigma Prime, a auditing firm, to perform an external audit on the ENS smart contract username registrar.sol. And we started this maybe the week after ETH Berlin. They got it back to us this past week. So they did it really, really quickly. Without lack of quality and report. So we're now going through the report with them to fix the issues they found. On a quick overview, I don't want to go too deep into this because we'll make this public after we fix all of the things that they report. 3 classified medium risks, 1 classified low risk, and 5 informational points of note. So overall, they were really impressed with the quality of the work that we did. And we're very happy with the quality of the audit that they performed us. So once this is done, I imagine Ricardo will have most of the fixes done. They'll sign off on all the fixes, create a more finished report, and then we'll release that to the public to show that this is what we've done. If you'd like to see it, just ping me and I'll invite you into the kind of the channel that we have going through. And I can share the report with you. I just ask that we don't put this out until we're completed with the entire audit, and then we can make it public. That's really about it. That's all I wanted to say. Are there any questions or comments?
I liked the quality of the Sigma Prime. They really understood what we needed, so they really thought about our application. They not simply look it into our contracts or files, but they also look it into our concept. So at overall, the quality of the report was great. And regarding the issues it found, some were medium, but they were very unlikely to happen because they all were related to the controller of the contract. So
yeah.
the others would not. So no funds at risk at this point, but unless we had some problems with the controller.
Right. Cool. I guess does anyone have any like super quick announcements, like 20, 30 seconds, something they want to mention to the rest of the group?
Yeah, I have another one real quick that's outside of the contract stuff, and that is we are signing a contract with ThreatStack to have some monitoring services of all of our infrastructure that we consider critical infrastructure. Over time, we'd like to minimize this as much as possible, so we rely almost on no critical infrastructure, but we'll always have some. So ThreatStack is just a service that allows us to see who's doing what on those computers so that if something goes wrong, we can mitigate it and triage it quickly.
Cool. Anything else? Andy, maybe you want to super briefly, if you something. Oh, Andy's not here.
I am here, and
oh, you are.
Very briefly. I've just moved across our docs to use a different static site generator called Hexo because that's what Embark was using, and it's slightly more modular and extensible than Docusaurus. It should look mostly the same. What's interesting from a dev perspective is that Jakob has kindly helped me set up a particular pipeline to make contributing to this repo even easier. So if you want to change a specific page, you just need to go to docs.status.im. You'll see like an edit button. You can edit it in the browser if you like and are feeling really lazy, and it'll take you onto the develop branch specifically. Develop builds to a machine that we host and is hosted at dev-docs.status.im. That means that you can merge your changes to develop, check it on a live site, and then we only merge to master from develop with a fast forward flag once we're happy that the changes reflect what we want them to. So it should be really, really easy to contribute to the docs now. Like I said, just push to the develop branch and check out your changes on dev-docs.status.im. It means reviewing changes and maintaining the whole thing will be even easier. And I'll be working with various different people and pinging you over the next few weeks to make sure that your sections are up to date. Once we've got a good content pipeline flowing through there, then we can identify proper user journeys, feed that input back into design, think about iterating through the sites and figure out what the best way is to structure the information. But for now, getting the pipeline and everything set up has been the priority. So I hope you guys like it, and I'll be pinging you soon.
Awesome work, and the whole documentation.
Awesome.
Well.
Yeah.
Cool. Any final?
One super short thing is notice that from the next nightly, there will be a light client option in the nightly substatus. So it probably will work very poorly, but we bring it back alias, and Lucas will test it thoroughly, and we'll try to fix everything we find. So we are not really using only Infura as an only option. So far, Opstan only, but we're getting there.
By the way, did you try to use nodes from Discovery? It was maybe a month already. Actually, a node from any network can be discovered.
So there are enough Ropsten nodes right now, because I don't know, there was some problem that there wasn't enough Ropsten nodes in the network. Like mainnet was kinda working, but Ropsten, the people just weren't running LAS servers on Ropsten nodes. But I'll try. That's a big thing about for mainnet, I think, because there we can really rely on Discovery.
Yeah, for mainnet definitely. But last time I checked, it was months ago, maybe more than months ago. You could find a node for Austin and Rinkeby pretty fast, and if you enable Rendezvous, it will be even faster. So because they are easier to retrieve, so that's it.
Ping me on status or Slack, and we can continue there with this. Yeah, we need this for sure.
Cool.
So yeah, the last thing I'd like to say, I really like the voting DApp experience today. I thought that was pretty awesome. Could we do that on Fridays instead of stressy an hour or two before the dev call? I think that would be pretty awesome. That we have the agenda and a voting for it on Friday would be cool.
Sure. So
yeah, cool. So yeah, this perfect. So I guess having feedback on sort of this general format, do people like both the hot topics and not having regular things as well as the voting thing? I guess, yeah, I agree with you, what you just said, Michael. Does anyone else have any thoughts?
I really enjoyed that. It was a great conversation. Thanks, guys. See you online.
Do people miss having a kind of fixed portion, or do people think that hot topics and brief announcements or something like that works? I guess also in light with the fact that town hall is now not as frequent for most teams.
I mean, what I really enjoyed about today's session and actually last week's session is the quality of debate is just really awesome. And I don't know if you'll get that through a fixed update as opposed to hot topics that might be a bit contentious to a degree.
All right, cool. So it seems like everyone speaks like it, great. And I agree. So what about if so Friday we have the poll, and then I guess to be sure that you include in the poll, you should probably add your stuff to agenda Thursday latest. Does that sound reasonable to people?
Yeah, that sounds good. I mean, let's just get ourselves working ahead of ourselves, and so that we can be efficient and really use the time on Mondays like you just did today. I think it would be awesome.
Cool. Any other thoughts? Does that sound? Are people all right with that? All right. Cool. Thanks so much, everyone. Thank you, Pedro, for taking notes, and thank you, Graham, for the voting DApp experiment, and thank you, everyone, who tuned in on YouTube and so on. See you in 2 weeks. Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.
Cheers.
Bye.